Tess and Mayor. You both gave us really thought-provoking Divrei Torah today. Mayor, you asked, what does it mean to have a heart to know and eyes to see and ears to hear? And Tess, you asked, if the commandments are things that God rewards you for following and punishes you for not following, is that like a cult? Is it like the exercise of a dictatorial kind of power? What about freedom? And Mayor, you decided, with the help of Rabbi Green and commentary from the tradition, that having a heart to know and eyes to see and ears to hear means being able to recognize the big picture. And this is something that sometimes takes time. And it's often when we're looking back that we have the perspective and a greater understanding of what we lived through and can be grateful for the people in our lives who supported us through it. And Tess, you decided, with the guidance of rabbis, ancient and modern, that the commandments are not about removing freedom, but about providing structure and limitations to our freedom, in particular structure that promotes relationships with one another and with God, so that we can use our freedom in a way that doesn't cause harm to others or ourselves. I agree with both of you. And I'm thinking about the moment in which you are speaking these words. We are 10 days away from Rosh Hashanah. And this is the period in the Jewish calendar, this period that we're in right now, that's most dedicated to reflection on our lives and our behavior. And we're living in a time in this country in which people are increasingly using violence against one another in the name of freedom, and a time in which the threat of coercion by our government is growing as it grabs immigrants off the streets and threatens to send troops into our cities. I read a really wonderful commentary on this portion by Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Rabbi Sacks, who was the chief rabbi of Great Britain until he died in 2020, alav hashalom, gets into the etymology of the verb to command, which was really your question, Tess. In English, a commandment is something you obey. But it turns out that there's actually no word in biblical Hebrew that means to obey. I actually did not know this until I read this commentary. In fact, Rabbi Sacks relates something I didn't know, which is that when Hebrew was revived as a spoken language in the 19th century, they had to borrow a word from Aramaic, letzayet, to mean obey. So whenever you see obey in the Torah commentary or a translation of Torah, that translation is not accurate. The word command or commandment didn't mean something you automatically obey. The response to a command in the Torah in Hebrew is the word Shema. And Shema means to hear, or to listen, or to pay attention, or to understand, or to be willing to obey, or to respond with action. And Sacks says, quote, the very fact that it carries all of these meanings suggests that in the Torah there is no concept of blind obedience. That is not how the Torah conceives of the relationship between God and us. God, who created us in God's own image, giving us the freedom and power to think, wants us to understand the commandments. In other words, in the Torah, God is making the case to us that we should want to follow the commandments. And as you said, Tess, the commandments are meant to be the structure to create a just and free society, to respect human dignity, and to create harmony between people. We can always choose not to listen to them, not to hear, not to pay attention, not to understand, not to be willing to obey, not to respond with our actions. Commandedness is actually voluntary. But what God is saying is you should want to live this way. Sure, it takes self-discipline and sometimes sacrifice. You're not always going to get everything you want in the moment. But if you do this, if you choose to self-limit your freedom and to take only actions that promote fairness and dignity among human beings, you will experience blessings. God is calling us, saying, please use your capacity for reason. Use your capacity for restraint and discernment to make good choices with your lives. The blessings and the curses that are described are inherent in the actions themselves. All of our actions either promote life and its flourishing or degrade life and reduce it. Certainly, political violence is a total contradiction to the commandments of the Torah, and so is government coercion. Torah designs a system, now known as the judiciary, by which disputes can be adjudicated using words. Politics is meant to be the way that a diverse society manages disagreements and makes decisions without violence. In addition, no person, regardless of their position, is supposed to force another person to obey. Even God restrains God's own power to appeal to us to follow the commandments instead of forcing us. This is essential to the dignity and freedom inalienably held by every human being. For at least 2,000 years, the Jewish people have believed that arguing with one another can actually be constructive. We call it machlochet l'shem shamayim, an argument for the sake of heaven. This is an argument in which both sides treat the other with respect. That is an important ingredient. And in accordance with the word Shema, are trying to listen and trying to understand, an argument in which the mutual goal is truth. Our sages Hillel and Shammai demonstrated that such an argument sharpens the thinking of both parties and advances everyone's learning. This is a model of how to be in a highly polarized time, which is ours. To assume you don't have all the answers, to argue with respect for the other, and to listen and try to understand. This summer, we decided here at CBE that we are going to pursue a long-term dialogue with a church somewhere in America, we haven't found it yet, in which many congregants might describe themselves as MAGA, and a church who might want to get to know some liberal Brooklyn Jews for the purposes of listening and understanding each other a little bit more. We're looking for that church and for that right partner. And if you have a relationship with someone in your family or friends who belongs to such a community, in what we think of as a quote-unquote red state, we'd love your ideas. We are living in a confusing and highly polarized time. A time when it's difficult to see the big picture while we're in it. According to your teaching, Mayor, one thing that might help us is to imagine someday when we look back at this time, when history tells the story of this time, how will we want to have behaved? Who will we want to have been? I'm going to say a lot more about this on Rosh Hashanah. We might think to ourselves, there's nothing I can do. I'm just a kid. Or I'm just an average person. What am I supposed to do? It's all so much bigger than me. But what this Parsha and the Torah and Judaism are always saying, fundamentally, is that your actions matter. No matter how small you are, and we are all very small, or no matter how small any moment seems, every action matters. The world is always in a precarious balance. It sure feels that way right now, doesn't it? And everything we do matters. Given that this period of Elul, this month before Rosh Hashanah, is dedicated to an examination of our words and our actions, it's an ideal time to be asking the questions that you asked today, Mayor and Tess. Am I showing gratitude and using loving words with the people I love? Am I showing respect and kindness toward people I don't know or don't agree with? Am I listening? Am I living with honesty and integrity? Am I seeking opportunities to care for someone who's vulnerable right now? Am I using my freedom in ways that I'm proud of? In ways that make the world a little less frightening for someone else? In ways that make the world a little more fair? In ways that make the world a little more loving? Let's ask these questions for real. Let's answer these questions with our words and our deeds. Let's have the heart to know, and eyes to see, and ears to hear. And let's make the difference that we can make with our own lives. Shabbat Shalom. Shana Tova.